That way I have an accurate count of who everybody is.
Imagine we can ask it.
I have. And the person says don't legally have to do so.
If they don't announce, what do we do?
I will just leave as Zelda. Okay. Peter McDevitt, Craig Leggett,
Here.
Brad McGowan,
Here.
Eugene Merlino, Jack Diamond, Mike Wild, Travis Whitehead. Okay, everyone's here. Roll call. Peter McDevitt. Craig Leggett. Brad McGowan.
Yeah. They're not working. Thanks. Appreciate that. No, hang on, because I don't think anybody can hear us. So we might have to restart over, because I thought you were a little quiet today. It's, not normal.
Did I miss something?
Hello.
It's on.
Check,
All right.
check.
Okay.
Somebody's got their mic on.
Okay. Why don't I start over? It's for the public record. Okay. Welcome to our Thursday, October 19th, 2021 meeting of the Warren County Local Development Corporation. Roll call.
Hold on one second.
You
Okay,
may,
Peter McDevitt.
you gotta mute your,
It is.
on your screen. Yeah, it says mute.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, Peter McDevitt.
Here.
Craig Leggett.
Here.
Brad McGowan.
Here.
Gene Molino.
Here.
Jack Diamond.
Here.
Mike Wild.
Here.
Travis Whitehead.
Here. Can I then get a motion in an effort to get it on the floor on our minutes of our last meeting?
So move.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Supervisor Merlino. Travis.
Discussion. Thank you. I just wanted to note that I was a member of the IDA. We went through an audit back then, and one of the comments, I believe, from the ABO was that while we have an awful lot of ability to control our future, that it should be documented that we discuss these issues before voting on them. And I think particularly if there's some disagreement, that ought to be at least noted in the minutes. And there is no note when we passed the budget. I asked for discussion. Actually, nobody on this board was allowed to discuss the budget. And then it was passed 5-2. Now that's reflected here, but I would like to see in the future, I don't have to go back and do it now, but actually I'll propose to do it now, that, there was some discussion and that the point made before that 5-2 vote was that we didn't have discussion. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second to approve the minutes of our last meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Roll call, Peter McDevitt,
Yes.
Greg Leggett.
Yes.
Brad McGowan,
Yes.
Jay Molino,
Yes.
Jack Diamond,
Yes.
Mike Wiles.
Yes.
Travis Whitehead.
Yes.
Ms. Daly, Lisa Daly, do you have some information as it relates to our financial statements going forward?
I sure do. I think you have them in your packet. Let's see, I'm gonna just pull it up on my screen. So as far as the statement of financial position, you can see that everything is fairly status quo from the prior month. However, you will notice that the operating account is now at $2,000, and that's because we have the signed contract between the LDC and the EDC. So I was able to issue payment to the EDC for January through August, I believe. Yeah, January through August. So that's why there's a decrease in the checkbook balance on that one. I have provided the check register, so you'll see that payment. That would bring the accounts payable down to just one payment to the EDC that is due as of 9/30. So there's a quite a decrease in the accounts payable as well. That's all balance sheet related. As far as the statement of activities, there was no activity during the month other than the one payment to the EDC. Everything else is status quo. We continue to collect interest on the loans and interest on a couple of our bank accounts. So no changes there. And you can see from the year-to-date expenses versus budget that we are pretty much on track to what we budgeted. And then the next one is just the month of September. And again, not a lot of activity there. The final report is the check register and then the loan portfolio, which has been updated through September 30th. And that's it. Any questions?
Supervisor Diamond has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the Warren County financial statement, and my question is, it looks like our total assets are $1,716,444. And if I'm reading this correctly, unrestricted net cash, and I think we've talked about that on several occasions, is cash that we can apply to anything that we want to do. So the cash value, the total assets is 1,000,007. And if I'm reading this correctly, 1.2 million and change is part of that total assets. Is that correct?
Well, the total assets do include the loan balances that are due to us. So that's not necessarily money that we have in hand. It's money that we anticipate receiving. So the cash on hand would be 1,057,000, and that is available for whatever programs we incur.
So the cash that we expect to see is part of the $1.2 million. Is that what you're telling us? Because I'm reading this, and maybe we ought to clarify this, that when we say unrestricted, that means unrestricted usage.
Right, that's correct.
So is it 1.2 million unrestricted cash? Or is it 1 point whatever we're trying to collect on top of the net cash?
Let me try to clarify here, if I will, Supervisor Diamond. Unrestricted and restricted has to do with whether or not those funds are committed to a specific identifiable on the financial statement area. Cash refers to what is in the account. A dollar can be both. So in this particular case, the LDC has $1.218 million that is unrestricted. And of that, just over 1 million is in cash.
And the remaining amount is receivables.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Any further questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the financial statements of September 2021? Roll call, please.
We need a motion.
Motion.
A motion to approve the,
Mike? And I need a second.
I'll second.
thank you.
Brad? Okay, roll call. Kevin?
Yes.
Craig Leggett?
Yes.
Brad McGowan?
Yes.
Gene Molina,
Yes.
Jack Diamond?
Yes.
Mike Wild?
Yes.
Jeff Whitehead.
Yes.
Turning it now over to you, Jim. Just go ahead and take it as you see fit.
Thank you. We have a couple of items we'd like to bring the board up to speed on. Could you throw the log up on the screen? One of the things that had been requested in past meetings was status on a number of items that have been requested by members of the public. So we maintain a log of all these items, whether they be formal foils or any kind of registered complaint. I wanted to make sure that everyone knew exactly what the status of everything that has been logged so far is. You can see the sheet in front of you. There's a number of them that have already been fulfilled, either foils or, well, I think they were all foils that have been fulfilled. There is one outstanding ethics complaint, which has been forwarded by our governance committee to our attorney. I spoke with our attorney about this last night. It is still under review. We have scheduled a meeting in early November to hopefully receive the initial findings from that, at which point we, assuming that there's resolution, we would then bring it back to the governance committee. In terms of open items, there are 2 specific open items from a member of the public. You can see what specifically is being sought here. I do not anticipate that we will have a difficult time identifying those materials. We're in the process of identifying them and responding by the dates that you see there. So with your input, I would suggest that we, maintain this and share this with you quite regularly. It will just make our communications more efficient so that, this way you always know every month where we stand. Also want to make sure you understand that this is probably the basis of, to some degree, some legal cost. And our attorney has yet to invoice us. I spoke to him about that last night, and he said that he would invoice us. So there is a receivable that will come due on reviewing some of these materials. I don't have that figure yet, but I don't think it will be extraordinary, but it will be something. You all have in your packets or had submitted to you the loan portfolio. I would very much like us to go into executive session today to discuss the loan terms of 2 particular loan portfolio participants where their terms are no longer current. This has been something we've actually wanted to do for some time, and the meetings themselves just haven't lent themselves to that. There was some discussion also about making sure that we had freedom in the way that we schedule the meetings so that situation would not reoccur. While I can't control what happens with this room, we always endeavor to try to make sure that there's a buffer beyond 1 hour anytime we schedule it. And indeed, today that is the case. I can't always control that will be the case. If so, we will just do our very best to alert you as to what time we have. But today we certainly have that. There's a number of other items that I'd like to share with you that have either been discussions that I've had with individual board members or that have come up in the conduct of the business of the LDC. One is about the communications that you would like to be apprised of. Our bylaws are silent to this. The only thing that they specifically state is that any ethics complaint be forwarded to the governance committee. Obviously, we have a responsibility to respond to any FOIL request and apprise you of any request that's come from the public. But beyond those two things, there is nothing specific in our bylaws that suggests what it is that you would request from anyone that was contracted to run this organization. And if there are specifics that you as a board feel are appropriate for us to pass on, it's not so much me as I think anyone that would operate in this role probably could benefit from some clarity about what that threshold would be. I just want you to know that our rule is fairly consistent. Unless it's legally required, I don't disclose any communications from you to anyone, nor do I disclose any communications from the public to me, unless there's a specific legal request or a specific legal requirement for me to do so. It's a tough spot to try to figure out which ones to pass on and which ones not to pass on. And so until you provide other guidance, I'm not going to provide anything that isn't legally required. And that's mostly to just be consistent. I would say in a given week, I probably get between 50 and 100 communications associated with LDC business. Some of them are very rudimentary. Interest in loan applications, interest in the organization. Some of them are very specific. Why do you do this? Why does somebody do this? I don't respond to those, but I also don't share them. It's part of, I think, the role of anybody that's in the day-to-day operations to essentially act as that receiver of those communications. But maybe, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but we certainly see that as we are an absorber of it, and we then filter that to only that which is required.
Jim,
Go ahead.
but they would be available to the board if.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. But as a matter of course, I do not forward anything unless it's specifically required. Your inboxes will be fairly full if I took everything that came into me on the LDC. And I think also it calls into question about what exactly is our role. We're not purely record keepers. We're here to administer the actual loan portfolio and the operations of the organization. I think we try to do this very consistently as we do with the EDC, which is, as a staff, we have a specific set of responsibilities that we're called on to execute. That's put in our contract. And we get asked a lot of stuff that isn't specific to those things. It would be inappropriate for us to engage in those things. And so that's why I don't respond to them. For instance, I don't make policy. So if someone sends me an inquiry that says, why does the LDC do this? I don't answer them. I do direct them to you because you are the ones that set the policy. But I also don't pass that on to you unless there was a specific request to do so. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't know whether it's appropriate for either the governance committee or the board as a whole, but I think it would probably be productive for us to have an affirmative statement of exactly what you do require that we pass on to you that is not a legal foil or complaint. In addition, there were other questions that were raised at different times about the scope of the work that we do. Now that we have our contracts resolved, I think that this is very, very clear. The EDC is contracted by the LDC board to primarily do two things, and it's described in the contract. One is to administer the loan program on your behalf. So we become the entry point for anybody that has inquiries about that. We also are the ones that manage the transactions and the ongoing portfolio management of those that have entered into the loan portfolio. We also have the day-to-day responsibility to advise you about economics, connection to the overall economic development arena in Warren County, and to essentially operate the organization that is the LDC. In that capacity, for instance, it's typically delegated to us to do things like produce minutes. But there are many things that we do that are not actually captured by our contract. And we're going to have to address now that we've become, I think, more aware of our need for independence. It used to be, for instance, that all legal inquiries went to the county. We now have legal representation that is unique to the LDC board. That's a new area of responsibility, which I don't have any trouble stepping into, but it's not defined in our existing contract. We have responsibility for managing the IT infrastructure that the LDC uses. Right now, we're doing that in cooperation with the county. But for instance, if the LDC had a different standard by which it wanted to operate its communications than the county, we'd be kind of stuck right now because we don't have a unique IT provider. We don't have an IT network that is unique. We depend on the county's IT staff right now under agreement with the county to continue to post all the things that are required to meet the public's access. But it's a legitimate question about whether or not we should be using the county's infrastructure to do that. I don't know what the answer is. I do know that our contract doesn't include any IT discussion. So I'm probably going to need some input from all of you as we enter into the next year, trying to figure out how do we structure whatever it is that you would like to best do. Facilities wise, we use the county. And sometimes that's a struggle because this room is oftentimes booked at the times that are most convenient for the majority of you. We could definitely find other facilities. It would both come at a change in our logistics and also a potential cost. But none of that's addressed in our existing contract. So I think we just have to, as we enter into the coming year, I think we just have to figure out what it is that this group wants. And then we will make sure that we address it if we're the contractor that is chosen, and that you also reflect those requirements if you're seeking anyone else to do this work. A couple of updates about the local economy, which I think are very upbeat. We have multiple loan applications that are in process now. This is the first time that that's been the case for pretty much the entire term of the pandemic. So roughly 15 months ago, our LDC loan portfolio really applications dried up. That was largely due to the availability of funds that were forgivable and that were related to the pandemic. There's clearly a realization that those funds are now drawing to a close, and we're starting to see interest in the community. I expect that I had hoped to bring one of these to you today. However, they still didn't finish their application. We spoke with them late last week, and I expect that certainly by next month we will. There's probably 2 more that could potentially come to you based on what we've seen before the end of the year. But all this is a really good sign. Some of them are small, some of them are fairly large in terms of their ask. Last night I went to a meeting with Kirsch Helmets, who's in our existing portfolio, to talk to them about their long-term plans. I think it is very likely that they will be seeking additional support in the next 12 to 18 months. And I like the fact that they come and talk to us about that proactively. They're not exactly sure exactly when they would and exactly what they would, but they're open with us about their, and including us in their growth plans. I think this is a really good thing that we're able to provide to you, which is a direct connect to the businesses that we support. I was able to sit down with Kirsch and really understand a little bit about where they're trying to go. And then before they commit to certain directions, advise them about what might be more likely in terms of public support, whether it be for incentives that could come from the LDC or from other organizations. That's a good thing that they see the LDC as that kind of resource and asset. The last thing I'd like to tell you is that we scheduled that housing forum for roughly it's several weeks ago. And unfortunately, during that week, all of us were quarantined in our office and several people were sick. So we also stood down because some of the people that we had sought to come to that with us were very uncomfortable with the idea of doing so and wanted to be here personally. The Banking Review Committee, though, does have some input that they would like to provide, and we're going to reschedule that meeting so that they can, as a group, make sure that their voice is coming to you, not only in terms of individual loan applications, but the direction that they see in terms of the need. Whether that's about housing or not, I think is a question that I would like to continue to bring you information on. I've engaged the Council of Economic Development for the state of New York, and they've started sending me materials. I'm meeting with their vice chair later this week to talk about having them come with us on whatever date we reschedule so that they can share with you the larger picture from the state in terms of need for housing assistance and how organizations that are involved in economic development such as ours are being utilized in that process. mostly for pure education so that you can understand what others are doing. At the same time, I've asked our attorney for a clear reading on what he believes to be our chartered limitations in terms of what we can or can't do from some of the formation of the LDC and also in terms of what our existing mission and charter is today. When we meet with him in early November, I'm hopeful that we will be able to at least get an initial take from that. I do believe that we shouldn't schedule this forum until we can get both of those things in, just for purposes of consolidating it. When I originally scheduled it, I was going to do almost all the talking. You guys hear from me a lot. I'd really like to try to figure out if there's some other people who we could bring to this conversation. Before I came to this meeting, though, we have a weekly economic recovery call that the EDC has chaired for some time. And actually, Supervisor Wild was the initiator of this at the very beginning of the pandemic. I can tell you that like every other forum that I'm in, does not take more than 10 or 15 minutes before housing becomes a central topic. In a nutshell, we have 1,500 open jobs today in Warren County. We have 4.6% unemployment. 4.6% unemployment for the month of October is essentially zero for our regional economy. Because we are a seasonal economy, there are a certain percentage of our workforce that chooses to opt out and have systemically for many years. Typically, it's even bigger than 4%. It's typically between 5 and 8% historically. So if our unemployment is at 4.6% in the winter, that essentially means we are at full employment in this area. The 1,500 job openings, there have been at least 1,500 job openings every day of this calendar year in Warren County. There are exactly 134 homes, single-family homes for sale in all of Warren County today. Of those, only 80 are below $500,000. There, as best I can tell, and I do not know this exact number, but it's a pure estimate, as best I can tell, there are roughly 300 apartments available today in Warren County. If you add those two together, we do not have the housing capacity to meet even 1/3 of the open jobs that we have today. We are not alone in this, by the way. Every community that I talk to has the same problem. If our economy is going to grow, even if our own existing employers are going to meet their current needs, we are going to have to bring workers from outside the area, and there's going to have to be a place for them to live. Whatever community steps into this best is going to prevail. The work follows the workers today. It is not the other way around. Companies are not coming to us for our financial incentives. Our door is not being knocked down by companies that demand that we immediately provide them with either tax incentives or loan packages. They want to know whether or not we have employees. And if we have employees, they want to enter into a conversation about how they could at least be partially here. Most of these discussions are 5 and 10 people at a time tops, sometimes 1 or 2. It's very rare that I'm talking to somebody about 200 at a time, because nobody can go anywhere where there's a need for 200 people, because there's just not 200 people anywhere. There's not 200 people in Albany to go fill a line for Regeneron. Angiodynamics has had their third line basically understaffed this entire calendar year. They draw from the entire capital region. This workforce shortage is universal. I am not telling you that the LDC must address housing. I am telling you that this community must address housing if we're going to even get back to entitlement of what our economy was prior to the pandemic. I do think it's worth the LDC considering, though, and I'm going to try to bring you as much information as I can so that you can make a decision for yourself about what the role is for the LDC in that. One last thing I'd like to mention, though, is that the LDC has always historically had a role in this. When the Community Block Grant was originally developed back in the mid-'80s, it was around assistance to the community that included housing. Now that grant has been fulfilled. There is no longer any obligation from that original request from the Community Block Grant structure, but it is traditional. And in fact, as recently as the last few years, we have had things on our balance sheet that included assistance to individual homeowners in Warren County that came from this LDC. I would also say that since I've been a member of the board, this LDC has assisted in housing studies together with the EDC on behalf of Warren County. So we have traditionally had a role that predates any of the information that I'm sharing with you today in terms of at least understanding the housing situation and how it relates to economic development in the county. And on our balance sheet today is a reserved amount, which we have carried for several years, for a portion of a housing study to be financed together by the LDC, the county, and the EDC. So it is not a question about whether or not we're involved. It's simply a matter of to what degree. We're already involved. And I applaud that. I really feel like it's necessary. But we'd like to bring you the information so that you can make maybe an even more fully featured decision. Initially, that will come in a workshop that will allow you to ask whatever questions you need, that will not have the sense of urgency of any kind of motion or direct action. And I know that others have asked about the materials that we would present, making sure that they're available before that meeting, and we would indeed do that as well.
Any board members with any comments? Travis?
Thank you. First of all, I agree wholeheartedly that there needs to be better direction on what it is that is shared with the directors when inquiries come in. I would think at a minimum, when things like FOIL requests are coming in, we ought to know, particularly since you said there, could be costs associated with dealing with those. You brought up the idea that we ought to revisit our bylaws because they're silent on this. I, again, wholeheartedly agree with that. But we got to start doing some of these things rather than just sitting here and hearing, that are problems. I've heard repeatedly that housing is a problem here in Warren County. And as you indicated, it seems to be a problem everywhere. But our focus is on employment. And you're making the assumption that housing is what's killing employment. When you say there's 300 apartments available, 80 affordable homes, it doesn't seem like it's going to keep an individual from coming to this area. And if more individuals came to this area, in the past, the market has accommodated that. There's Skimmer Horns, et cetera, in here have added apartments. People have built houses. I mean, it happens. But when there are empty apartments and empty homes wanting to be sold, there isn't a tremendous demand. I would suggest that while I agree 100% that there's an employment problem here and elsewhere, that it isn't necessarily housing, and we shouldn't necessarily jump to that conclusion. We should focus on employment. I could give you another possibility of what's causing the problem, and we could look at that. For each house, for each apartment, there are generally 2 adults in there at least, a male and a female, and maybe some children. Well, we know in the last couple of years that it's become a whole lot more difficult for that second person, whether it be male or female, to join the workforce and give up the ability to take care of their children because of remote learning and other things that have been around. Childcare is if we had more access to childcare, then I believe that you would probably get more people into the workforce, more people available in the workforce without any need for additional housing because they're already living here, but they're not two job families anymore. They're perhaps a 1-job family with one person taking care of the children. So, that's just another thing to consider. Getting back to the bylaws and our problems, the reasons why we haven't done anything in the last 15 months, which to me is disturbing to think about. But yet there hasn't been a clamor for loans. But if you look at our bylaws say that we can't loan out money except between 5 and 9%, which is, maybe when they put that together in 2012 or whatever, those were decent numbers. Today, 5 to 12% is, something that needs to be adjusted. And certainly we could adjust. But we need to start looking at things like that. Also in the bylaws is wording that we should be expecting at least one new job creation for every $15,000 loaned. I look at the loans that we've made over the past few years since that policy was in there, and I see an awful lot of loans that don't meet that criteria. Again, we can have discussion. We can go ahead and discuss and say, you know, for whatever reason, we believe that $15,000 per job is something that we ought to not hold fast to in this case. I don't have a problem with that. But I'm just saying, these are in the bylaws and we need to start looking at those bylaws. Another thing missing from the bylaws, and it's silent, is any mention of rules of order. We had a problem last meeting trying to decide whether or not we were following any rules. Again, it seems to be silent on that, and that's unacceptable. Without rules, there's chaos. And, I do not want to see chaos. So I'm just suggesting that we take a better look at our bylaws. And when we do that, and when we investigate how we can help the community in other ways besides loans, one of the first things that we should do probably is to find out what strings are attached on the $1.2 million that remains available for us to lend. I've been asking about what the original source of those funds were, and what strings might be attached to those funds. And not getting anything from management here. I contacted Wayne Lamont and asked him if he knew anything about the original source. And he wrote back and he said that the LDC was initially capitalized through the use of community development block grant funds. The grants were awarded to the county in response to a competitive application process from 97 to 2006. As loans were issued out of those funds, the repayment was to the county LDC, not to the county general fund. Once those funds were paid to the LDC by the loan recipient, the funds are subject to the rules and policies of the LDC. In general, it was assumed that the use of funds would be generally consistent with prevailing CDBG, that's Community Development Block Grant Fund rules and regulations. Hope that helps, Wayne. And that does help. And if you go to the website, which discuss what's possible with these HUD type funds, you'll find any number of things, including housing, for instance. But whereas in some areas they say that grants are possible, they indicate that in housing it would be more studies and administration and that kind of work, not any direct help. But there were other things that stood out to me. One was people affected by local disasters. It wasn't too long ago that there was quite a bit of flooding up north, but the county wasn't impacted to the extent that FEMA or anybody else declared this and made aid available to them. But it seems that the LDC could, under circumstances like that, take up issues where there's local disaster relief needed. Also, we can provide grants for substance abuse, housing, and programs, though I think that there's going to be quite a bit of income coming in from that, from this recent opioid settlement. Neighborhood stabilization program. And, Glens Falls has this issue with the zombie homes, et cetera. We could be looking at that. There could be some more housing. You deal with those zombie homes, and then all of a sudden here you got some more housing that for people that might move in. There are a lot of things that we can do, and I think that if we drew together as a board, and if the directors actually participated more in these meetings, that we could serve the community better than we have been in the past 15 months. So that's my message, and I stand ready to work on this, and I'd like to. I hope that we all take some time, look at the bylaws, et cetera.
Thank you, Director Whitehead. Appreciate it. Is any,
Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman, just a couple of
Supervisor
comments. When Mr. Sipline mentioned the inquiries, I'm a little concerned of confidentiality. Right now, we have businesses that typically have struggled with traditional financing, and they've used the LDC as that method to help move them forward. And I think that that's not something that they probably want out in public. So I would prefer to have our administrative team make those decisions in terms of what comes to this board and what doesn't. I'm sure if an application hits, then we'll see it. But I don't think we need to know ahead of time from the standpoint of a confidentiality standpoint. Secondly, in terms of what type of information to share, I'm not sure I can really comment on that because I don't know what some of the requests have been in terms of to be shared. I feel comfortable with the information that we've been presented here in our board meetings, but I'm not sure what I'm missing. But I trust Mr. Sipline and his team to be able to do the right thing. So I guess I'd need specific examples in terms of some of the requests for information sharing. I definitely don't need my email inbox filled up any more than it is. And just a comment about one of the statements of Director Whitehead, rules of order. I've lived through a year's worth of emphasis on Robert's Rules of Order. And to be honest, there's some room to improve this. And my sense is it's all about decorum and giving everyone a chance to be able to voice their opinion. And I think that's the most important thing because we need the input from all these different individuals here so that we can make good decisions. Voicing your opinion is one thing. There is opportunities to take advantage of that, but that falls into the my sense of decorum and respecting everyone else that's sitting at the table. So I'm not thrilled with trying to make sure we follow all the elements of Robert's Rules of Order, as long as this group can be civil, follow decorum, and we all have a chance and an opportunity to speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Supervisor Welch. Supervisor Merlino, please.
And, listening to Mr. Whitehead, a lot of good points. But in our bylaws, mainly we could not, this is only my opinion, not yours, just mine. I'd like to help people in small towns and floods and things like that. But the idea of this group that I was always understood was right, is we try to promote businesses to get employment. Now, if we spend a lot of our money helping people that really need it from floods, and where are we going to get our return from that? And if we get too far along in some of these things, I think we're going to lower the amount of money that we have for the interest of what this was really meant to be, strictly, not that it has to be strictly business, but the idea all these business people need money. We keep them going, they keep employees going. And, so to get into a lot of that stuff of other problems, I just don't think we have the finances for it, in my opinion. I'm not saying we can't do something, but those people that have problems like flooding and need help repairing their homes and stuff should have insurance, but if they don't, we can help them. But we're not going to get that money back, I don't think, as easy as signing contracts with business people. So, I mean, it's a great idea, but I don't know if this is the right department to go after that kind of money. So, but some of the good ideas, but I think we were just made up to come and work strictly for businesses, and because that's the ones that bring the employers into our community. Housing is a problem. And I think we all learned a lot as business people. Like myself, a small little business person, I can't get help. Can't get it at all. And I work 12, maybe 13 hours a day, keeping my business going because I'm back to doing bathrooms and making beds, and which this time of year, well, up November, but up until the end of October, I would have 7 employees. Right now I have 3, And that's counting my wife and I. So, that's where we learned a lot about the foreign students that come to our county. We really never calculated how important they really were. We all just used them and everything was hunky-dory until the virus came. So we need the foreign students. I was just talking to somebody this morning at Town Hall. I don't even see the kids going down the street on bicycles or playing or walking, around. Where is everybody? It just amazes me. We have statistics, how many people are unemployed, but how many jobs do we have available for those unemployed people? So that's where and I always went with Senator Little and Dan Stack and them that, you give away free money, that hurts. But if you give away free money, which is deserved, some people need it. But I always felt they should get a job for 20 hours a week. Then the government can help them with the other 20. The employees get helped, the people get helped, and the government's giving you the money to help them. So that was, I think, one big mistake the whole country, not just Warren County, made. These employees would come to work because I have a lot want to come. They knock on my door, but they all want to get paid cash. We're collecting unemployment, so we can't. And, you don't blame them. And I had a lady, and I think I mentioned this last month, month before, I wanted her to come with me, but she's making $720 a week to stay home. Why should she take my $400? So there's a lot of problems that not our fault, but not the country's fault, but that hopefully, and I just said this to Travis when he walked through, we were talking about the virus. If this doesn't come to an end reasonably good by the end of this year or partly into next year, we're still in trouble for another 2 years. But back to some of the comments, we just can't help everybody. I think we have to pick our niche, and that's what's most important to what we have to do. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Supervisor Merlino. Any, Jack, then you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the agenda today, and I do have some comments that I want to make, but I want to make sure that they're at the appropriate time of the agenda. I've heard different subjects brought up here in a variety of different ways, but is it, looking at the agenda, is my comments and questions that I may have, would that fall under the category of any other business, or is this the appropriate time?
I would say just go ahead, Jack, and
Okay,
let it rock and roll.
I've heard time and time again from Director Whitehead that we need to take a look at our bylaws. I agree with him there. This board is here to be serving the community, and we need to figure out what our identity is and what our role is going to be. If you look at the purpose of the original bylaws that were drafted in 2011, the bylaws, the purpose was to basically, the objects and purpose of this corporation are the objects and purpose stated in the certificate of incorporation, which brings up another topic, and particularly encourage the location and expansion of industrial and manufacturing capacities. That was our goals in 2011. Now, maybe we need to go in another direction, and that's okay also. And it says creation of new and improved job opportunities. It's job retention and new jobs. That was our original goal in 2011, but maybe things have changed within our community that we need to do a detailed review, and I would ask this to be put on the agenda, next month's agenda, and take the entire hour dedicated to reading our bylaws, understanding our bylaws, and maybe drafting new bylaws if that's the pleasure of the directors or not. But I think we need to find out what our real purpose is here and put it in our bylaws. I'd also like to add, and I'm not saying to do these things all at once. We just don't have enough time in the day. But I would like to go through the economic development loan portfolio again. That was a revision in 2012. We're now heading into year 2022. Let's take a look at it. Director Whitehead brings up the fact maybe 5% is not a realistic interest loan number. Maybe it isn't. And how do we, and if we need to change that, then we need to change that to develop more business, more activity within our organization. We're all here for one goal. That's to improve our community. But I want to know, and my question would be at this point in time, what's the process of the directors getting items on the agenda? Do we need a formalized resolution to get this done? Or we say to the chairman, Mr. McDevitt, this is what we would like to see on the agenda, and we're going to appropriate a half an hour, 45 minutes to this discussion, so we can really figure out what our purpose is. Right now, we're talking about housing. If you go back to the original community development block grant, their focus was on low to moderate income people. Well, maybe things have changed since then, but I think we need to find out what our identity is going forward in 2022. So, I mean, I've got a couple of, I'd like to have time set aside to review the bylaws. I'd like to set time aside to review our loan fund, specifically reading through it. It talks about a business review committee. Mr. Chairman, can you tell me the members on the business review committee?
I know we have I think the principals from Glens Falls National Bank. We have,
Who is that?
what's his name?
Mark Yearshaw.
Who?
Mark Yearshaw.
He's on it?
Yes, that's an actual resolution that was made at the time that they were appointed. They're the major players in the commercial lending world. So they come from banks and organizations that support commercial lending in our community.
So
Standing group that,
what are their terms? How many members are they? And these are, this group of business people within the community ultimately review the application process and bring it forward to us. So to finalize.
to answer your question, there's several answers there. One is in the bylaws, the governance committee is specifically chartered with many of the things that you raised.
But
about
my
the bylaws.
point is, Jim, is that let's set a meeting aside to go through some of these questions that we may have.
Well, and I would suggest your own bylaws would suggest the governance committee bring that set of recommendations to you, and that the whole board then reviews whatever the governance committee has reviewed and presented. It's okay if you don't do it that way, but your bylaws say that that's the way that you wanted to operate.
So could I get a consensus of the directors here that in the next agenda meeting, which I'm going to say sometime in November or December, we'll leave some flexibility, that we go down and we sit down, and if it takes 2 meetings, let's go through the bylaws. Let's identify, rules, our rules. I agree with Supervisor Wild. Everybody should be heard, no matter how long it takes, or everybody needs to be heard. And, in our previous meeting, we had a situation where one director was cut off, but, we can move on from that. But I think we need to be able to figure out, what our rules are and include them in our bylaws. So I put that out to my colleagues here. Let's start working on these things so we know who we are and how we can help people.
I've spoken before, I know, but just on this topic, right? I have other things I can talk about and I'm going to save them for later.
And then Craig has something to.
I agree. We should do that, but I'm almost wondering if we need a working group to kind of go through this with the governance community, right? I know, Travis, you put a lot of thought into this and the like. And I think of this LDC as an investment and a reinvestment fund for economic development. And I've learned so much about economic development from last year and this year in terms of all the different things that I've stuck my nose into to try to figure out. And the scope is just mind-boggling. Transportation, childcare, housing, go on and on and on, education, wages, benefits. How do we incite people to take jobs? So maybe we just see if we can get a working group together and get some drafts in terms of some ideas in terms of what we're looking for. So we actually have some things to talk about, because I really don't want to put this on Jim's shoulders, because I think it should be on ours, right?
That's my point. We're the directors of this organization. Jim and the EDC is an employee of this organization. We need, as directors of the LDC, to figure out what direction we want to go, what we want to include in our bylaws, and start helping, other people out there and commit in the community with needs. I mean, the intentions are good. We want to help people. We've got money to help people, but our bylaws are antiquated, 2011. Our loan portfolio, 2011. I think at the very least, we need to update these things and get a consensus.
Thank you, Supervisor McGowan, then Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say, this is really wonderful. I like the input from everyone. I like the concerns, the approach. Jim is brought up a lot of points, and we've all contributed to agreeing with him. And I have to say, I feel that all the directors here and everyone we're all on the same page. So that's great in moving forward. Yes, I agree that it's time to revisit the bylaws. Things have changed. But one of the things I wanted to bring up is, the loans for flood victims or, weather victims and stuff like that. My brother lives in the middle of New Hampshire, and I take that road all the time. I've been taking that road for over 40 years to get out there through Vermont, New Hampshire. And I saw what Katrina did to businesses along that route. And I remember having to drive around for the longest time until they reopened up all the roads, and to go through and see some of these businesses and really restaurants that I wanted to enjoy on the way, not reopening, and wondering why. And, so with the times of changing, our land is getting smaller that we can bring in large businesses, so smaller businesses are going to be, more on the horizon. We had a hacker boat the other night at the planning board, look for a zone change over there. He's been wanting to come to Queensbury for years, and finally we've got him over here on Corinth Road. So, it's the smaller groups too, that, hey, if it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 6 employees, that's wonderful. But reaching out, to everyone is really our goal. And, every application is going to be important. To the fact of Jim taking all the phone calls and what he passes on when he does it, I have no problem with that. I have a lot of respect for Jim. We've dealt previously before. The way he handles things, I think he's professional. But a lot of companies are like, this is what we're toying with, but don't announce it yet. And I agree with that. And I have enough respect and trust in Jim to pass on what I feel is important. And at the time that he feels comfortable in allowing it. And but if you abuse that, Jim, I'm going to come in. No, but I'm just I'm real happy, really, of what we're bringing up today, and I believe maybe scheduling our meetings where we're not rushed is more important. Personally, 7 o'clock in the morning is fine with me to start. But yeah, but no, I just I'm really pleased the way things are going today. So let's keep this all moving in a great direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor McGowan. Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's set a governance committee meeting for November 11th at 10 o'clock in the morning, and start in on the bylaws. That's the object and purpose of the governance committee, and that's a good place to start.
Do we
And
worry
then-
about having too much? I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we worry about too many directors showing up and making it a
Yeah,
quorum?
I think so.
Okay.
think so. I can be corrected on
So
that.
the governance committee is,
Jack, myself and,
And Brad.
and Brad. And is that under quorum? But, you know, I'm fine with it
The
being.
three-person committee that's designed to,
Committee is correct.
you can elicit input from people, and you can create smaller interactions with others that would allow you to dialogue on that, but you just can't have four in the same place at the same time, or you're a full board.
That's not true.
Well, yeah.
All you need to do is notice it.
Okay,
That's it.
In our committee meetings are typically, staffed with many more than 10, supervisors here. So I think it might be just clearly a notice that we need to do.
well, I'm happy
Make it
to
a public
notice it. I
meeting.
just want to make sure you don't have an unnoticed meeting.
Can I
Yeah.
inject any meeting via either a committee meeting or a board meeting is always noticed, whether we have a quorum or not. If we don't have a quorum, then we either cancel the meeting or we have a discussion, but that is it.
I think the only thing is if you had four, you're actually meeting as a full board. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that the heading at the top of the minutes would be from the full board as opposed to the governance committee.
Correct.
Or
Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. I,
can we,
think,
Wait a minute.
can we finish up with
Go,
Thursday,
go
10
ahead.
o'clock? Can we use the EDC meeting room?
well, that's what I'd like to comment on.
Okay,
10 o'clock or 11?
maybe Brad wants to say it's 7.
Good God, now, please.
Mr. Chairman.
No, I had a point of order on that one. This must be too early.
If there's further discussion on.
I would just like to, I agree with the, having the meeting, but the governance, what I have found in the past when we break off into the smaller committees, all right, which I know why we have a governance, and that's really for grievances or foils or any other
Rewriting bylaws.
and rewriting bylaws. But, and then we bring them from 3 people to the group, and then we got to discuss it again, and then there's changes. Why can't we all, look at us today, why can't we all do this together if everybody's willing to come together? Because with the input, pardon?
Sorry, but that's not part of the bylaws.
Right, you can't. You can always schedule a ad hoc meeting. I only want to make sure you understand that at that point, you're meeting as the board as opposed to the committee. As long as you're okay with that, you can meet anytime, as long as you properly notice it.
And also November 11th is Veterans Day.
Oh my gosh, that's right. Sorry.
Oh, way to go, Supervisor Leggett.
Won't be able to make that.
And we will always make our
Director
facility-
Leggett here.
If it's helpful, our facility is always available, but, or we will come to wherever it is that you want to have to be.
Well, that was another point I wanted to make with shared services.
Oh,
And we can finish up this and I'll go back to that.
Supervisor
Just the
Marzino.
only thing, I like being on this committee, and I don't want to say I want to get off of it. My business is in the morning. My breakfast goes from 8:30 to 9:30. It's just get here at 10 if possible, unless I can't wash up and change clothes, So 10:30 or 11 is great for me, and I know you guys changed this a year ago for 11 for me. It's comfortable with me, and then I have to be back in my business by 1. So that's good for me. Even the county board meetings, I barely just walk in the door at 10 o'clock, 10 after 10, because I just can't make it. So, and a lot of committees that I'm on in the county start at 9 o'clock, and, until after November, that's almost impossible. That's just, but I will try to do as best I can.
We'll figure it out, Gene. We'll make it.
Gene, you can always come in your work outfit. I mean.
Yeah,
I
you
go
don't want
all
to
the
see me
time.
my workout.
We could come for breakfast.
Yeah. We'll meet at your
You
place.
had
Gene.
my
That
place,
sounds
I have
great.
breakfast for you guys, yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think this meeting was great. I really do. And all I even ask, and I will talk to all of you, is we got to treat each other civil. After all these years, 16 years sitting on this board, it's tough to sit here when you always get sometimes, we're stupid, we never do it right and everything else. It takes away from the interest of what we have to do. Civil speaking, talking amongst each other, right or wrong, if we agree or we don't agree. It stays civil, everybody will work it out well. So that's-
Thank you. Supervisor Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to summarize recently what we just talked about. So everybody, which I like the idea, everybody being there to initially talk about, our bylaws, so we don't have to go through the bylaws at another level. So basically, we're going to meet on this, we're going to pick a date, and everybody here will be invited to attend. Perfect.
I like that. I
What-
agree.
One point, if I may, just to make sure you understand what's likely to occur there. Most of the materials you need are in your board binder, but what we will do is send you, make sure everyone has a current copy of the bylaws.
Yes.
You had asked about the banking review committee. I'll make sure all the committees, it's in your packets, but we'll make sure you have a current list of everyone that's on the committees. There are several statutory things that are not in our bylaws that have, maybe they've been passed since 2011, I'm not sure, but for instance, we don't have a FOIL appeals process in our bylaws, which we have to, and I'll identify those things that I believe you need to address just to make sure that you're in compliance. But all the other stuff in terms of how this board operates, to what end and what your processes are, is a matter of your determination. If you want us to act as a focal point, for instance, if any of you couldn't come and you want to make sure that those comments are reflected, you're certainly welcome to send them to everyone. If you'd like, you can come talk to us so we can make sure that we give whatever context that you intended. We want to facilitate the process that you're trying to endeavor to do. And anything we can do to assist, we will do.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion?
Just to make every meeting, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I jumped in and I apologize. But it's always nice to have like an agenda or goals of what we're looking for. This thing seems like an awfully big pie for us to take a bite of in one meeting. So my suggestion would be is that we look through the bylaws and kind of agree on what are the topics that we want to start with. Instead of diving deep into them, just talk about the topics first and maybe some ideas and where it might go, but at least come out of that meeting with, this is what we're going to do the next meeting. Right? Let's make it efficient if we can. So I'm not sure who's running the meeting. Jim might facilitate it, but Craig,
Well,
it's your meeting, right?
The chairman.
Yeah.
can run it.
Brad,
Right.
I'll communicate with all of you, okay? But that we will arrive at a time and a date and we'll figure it out.
What I will do is I'll send out a doodle to everyone picking 3 dates.
Great.
And sometimes, and you guys send it back to me and we'll go with the majority.
We'll send it to Peter and he'll
Yep.
communicate. Okay, we'll just make all that information.
I just do have one more question. I know Director Whitehead did request some items on the agenda. How do we get items on the agenda?
So why don't you communicate with me and I'll communicate with Jim. Travis, communicate with me or Jim, and let's try to make an effort to be respectful of those issues, and we will make an honest effort to get it on the agenda. That's all I can. That's what we'll do.
Yeah, that's what I did on the 12th of October.
I'm sorry.
That's what I did on the 12th of October.
Okay, do you have anything specific that?
I did. I mean, it went out to all of you.
Well, traditionally, I think it's the privilege of the chair. I think that's the way it's always worked, at least in my brief experience with this, because there's always time limits in terms of what to do.
But I guess that, and we can talk about it in our bylaws meeting.
Okay, we'll make an honest effort to find a compatible agreement to ensure that everyone's interests on this committee are served, and anything that is reasonable by members of the body, we will make an effort to include them on the agenda. That's all I can say.
Sounds more.
Supervisor McGowan.
Now can I speak?
You sure can.
All right, thank you. Jim, you brought up and things that we have to look at. But in using the county email and, IT, a lot of things that we do over here, the BOS is, you know, with the towns and that is really shared services. And there's an opportunity here for a shared service, which in return benefits the LDC, the EDC is being able to use the county, which puts more money back into what we can do and we can do. So let's just make sure that's in our contracts that we have this shared service. I feel it's an important one to have. So this wouldn't be hanging over our head or be used against us that, you know, this is because it is we're all involved in the community here. And, you know, and speaking for all the residents of Warren County. So this is a great facility to do that. Or, you know, and even occasionally downtown or even at Jean's, I don't have a problem. I like early morning breakfasts too. So
I want to be clear, we're not advocating to change any of it. I only want to, we've changed our structure in the past year to where we are now acknowledging more independence. And it is likely that at least some kind of agreement has to be spelled out between us and the county in order to do that. And there may be some expense associated with it, but I am in no way advocating that we change what is working, only that we get our contract reflecting what it is we want to do.
Thank you, Jim. That's what I was trying to say. Let's get our contract to say that for our shared services. And I think everybody would be comfortable with that. So thank you.
Robert, any words of wisdom or?
No, nothing on my end. I'm really happy to see the board kind of taking charge and getting active here on managing the LDC. This is very good.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.
We do have to go into executive session.
Yes, we do have to go into executive session to talk about the modification of the loan terms for two loans. Can I get a motion to do that? Supervisor Diamond, second by Supervisor Merlino. All those roll call.
Peter Seven?
Yes.
Greg Liggett?
Yeah.
Brad McGowan?
Here, yes. Here.
Mike Waddle?
Yes.
Travis Whitehead?
Yes.
Gene Molino,
Yes.
Jack Simon?
Yes.
Okay.
So you've got to turn